Well, there's further proof that because markdown has not spread into business development, that one of the unicorns is not doing well. I think this is an article that you pointed out, right, Matt Ray?
Yeah.
Something about Evernote turning out poorly. And that was the first thought that I had when I read that. Now, I used to use Evernote a lot, frequently. I have a lot of stuff on it. Yeah. What happened?
We started using Google Docs.
Man, it went from okay to bad.
No, the product was fine. Just we started using Google Docs. I don't know why.
Yeah, I remember several years ago on the iPhone, just Evernote was really slow, and I don't really know whose fault that was. If it was the iPhone's fault or if it was the Evernote's fault. But man, it was just annoying. Like once I finally got it on my iPhone, like a place where you would always use notes, it just bombed out. Then it was no good.
But is it the real issue? Like I heard Merlin Mann, the guru to productivity. He sort of like had this epiphany where it's like, the notebooks, the note taking, the Evernote, the Google Docs, like none of it really matters. It just comes and goes. All of the stuff just comes and goes. It's like, are you getting the stuff done that you want to get done? And
Yeah.
Does Evernote really help you? And it seems like they just kind of fall in and out of the fad, right? It's like, well, this week it's Evernote, then you get tired of it and you go into something else. But at the end of the day, it's just like none of it really matters. None of it sticks, in my opinion. It's just sort of a fad. Comes and goes.
I mean, I guess to paraphrase the same productivity guru, Picasso didn't have markdown.
Yeah, well, the problem though is like, it's a fad. It comes and goes, but the fad was, $1 billion unicorn that everyone was like, hey. I mean, I guess it's one thing for a company with 20 million to go away, another for, how much VC do those guys get?
I don't know. I'm sure it's printed somewhere.
Yeah,
metaphorically speaking.
Well, but in the article we linked to, though, what was kind of crazy was some of the quotes from the CEO, or former CEO. He described himself as not being passionate about the many roles that fall to him.
Yes,
like building a sales team and helping employees grow in their careers and creating a predictable business model for Wall Street. It's like
right. No, it's sort of like
maybe you should not be a unicorn.
It's like, hey, man. I know you read the Netflix culture slides, but that stays within your walls. This whole like being honest about yourself and stuff. You don't talk about that outside of the walls.
Nobody gives the hippies VC. You're like, oh man, you can't expect us to like, I don't know, care about our employees' careers. You can't expect us to care about Wall Street. That's just the man.
Yeah, it's just Evernote is a weird thing because as we were saying, all of us used to use it, and it just suddenly like disappeared. And I can only think that the main reason, other than that slowness, is like it's like a closed system, right? Like that's the main issue. Is it like there's all of these other like text editors and things that are more open, but Evernote is just very like hard to integrate with anything. It's a classic Roach Motel. Like it's easy to get stuff in there, but it's really hard to get stuff out of there. And I'm no programmer, but like it doesn't seem like it's that hard to just sort of like be normal. Like they have their own
product management
database.
Right there. That is product management talk right there.
Yeah,
it's not that hard.
That's the note you take for Evernote.
Yeah, it's not that hard if you just. And
I mean, there's no Marvel superhero movies coming out this weekend, so can't you developers just go write that? Like,
wow,
how
far we've come.
You have come a long way from that developer in the dark.
Yes, it's even worse. I'm in marketing, so I don't understand why anything. Just. But it does strike me that like it's a good example of like what I was jokingly putting in our show notes, the what was it, the BDFH, the bastard designer from hell. Like it seems like if you were to sit down with the Evernote product people, you're like, yeah, but like I'd like to be able to have it like write and bidirectionally write files to a file system. They would be like, no, that's not what you want. like it's a very opinionated platform in that respect of like you can't like, nope, you don't want that. What you actually want is this awesome notebook that you can flip through and WYSIWYG stuff and integrating this. And they're right. Like I use, the whole like ponderous tool chain that we were joking about earlier of InValt and Editorial and Sublime and Dropbox and all this stuff. And like, I miss having images and like, things that are pretty. I like the utility nature of it, but it's like that era. Remember when trucks were like not comfortable inside, and now trucks are really comfortable inside? Like I want the truck that's really comfortable inside. The potential for utility, but maximum luxury. What do they call the Lincoln pickup truck?
Escalade.
Well, yeah, something like that. Yeah, the dump master probably is what it's called.
That does not connotate luxury. Dump master. Maybe the Dump Master XL.
Hall master. How about the hall master? Yeah.
So, but on the Evernote, my question on Evernote is, will we have the same conversation about Slack in 5 years? Will we be like, wow,
I was
that went away like that? I think it's interesting.
I was listening to one of my recently now coworkers' podcast, Arrested DevOps, and there was a whole episode on chat ops, and it was actually I'll have to find the link to put in the show notes. It was a good episode because they had I think maybe like 4 people. Oddly enough, Bridget wasn't on there if I remember. Maybe she was, but like there were 4 people on there. 2 of them were like pro Slack, and the other 2 were like, I don't know. And so it was this discussion, and it was along the usual lines of like, so this Slack thing is awesome. It makes it so you use email less, and it's chat, and it's archived, and it kind of fits into the workflow that you would use, right? So that's the pro Slack side. The other side was like, so what you're telling me is there's another stream of stuff I need to stress out about.
Well, it replaces that stream that you were missing. I think
yes,
but it is.
We've uncovered a new source of work.
We found more things you should pay attention to, and now that we have 300 Slack channels, now you have to master the mute. Because you can't leave the channels, you still have to be in them, but you have.
I think the best question, I forget who asked it, is like, so I do inbox 0. Is there a Slack 0?
No.
And that was like a mind bomb. In the sense of it, just like it was like mind bomb both ways.
Yeah, you turn it off, and then when you turn it back on, there's like 50 more notifications.
Yeah. Yes. So the answer to your question, Brandon, yes.
Well, but I mean, Slack is like the most Roach Motel thing there is right now. I mean, because everyone's like, oh, it integrates with everything. How awesome is that? And like, where's the feed on the back end?
But I just wonder if that's the interesting part is like anything that gets so big so fast, like will the impending backlash kill it? Or people be just what you said, like I think if you have 300 Slack channels, that maybe you've gone too far, right? Like that is causing a problem that it was trying to solve. So I don't know, just thinking, because I think Evernote never had this kind of attention, but there were some people that were zealots of it. We're like, this is the greatest thing, and I think even those people have kind of like waned off it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would always.
I was gonna say I'm very pro anything that is less email. So I'm just immediately on that bandwagon. So
well, that's why there's 300 channels. It's like you have a conversation for a customer with you add 2 or 3 people to it, and you don't kill it off, and they'll stick around. And so over time, when you go to search, you're like, what are all these conversations? And then you look at them, nobody's touched them for 2 weeks. So they accrete over time. So you have to be diligent.
You archived.
You gotta be diligent about archiving them and cleaning them up.
So I think the answer to that guy's question is like a yes. Somewhere out there, yet to be documented and fully adapted, used, are some practices. And I've noticed this in the old Slack. Like there's no consistent practices over the way that we use it, because we've never sat down and thought about consistent practices over the way we use it. But it seems like in the same way, people kind of have conventions in email, or at least people should know there are conventions in email.
All caps, top posting forever.
That's right. And I feel like we're a long way from the same thing in this whole Slack sort of thing there. Like where like just the idea of like you can start a little channel and then archive it. Boom. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's sort of like far along the maturity curve from where we are now.
All right, well, let's get it worked out, and someone write up the best practices on Slack that I'll never read, but you can just get it done.
The Dummy's Guide to
And
Slack.
if you could do it in Evernote, that would be even better.
That's right. Share it in
Markdown.
Evernote and we'll chat.
Share it in Evernote, and we'll Slack about it.
Markdown on GitHub.
Yeah.
Import to PDF.
God.
Yeah. It was just reading that article that prompted this just made me sad because I always feel bad about not using Evernote. I used it for so long. There was this feature in it in Windows. Windows was always like much more featureful than OS 10 for some reason. And it had this feature that you could go into all the Mac people out there can close their ears so that they don't blow up their heads when I talk about Outlook. But you would go into Outlook and you'd go into a calendar entry and you could right click and you would like create an Evernote thing like with the information and all the attendees of your meeting. And then you could just start taking notes. It was awesome. It was all sorts of little things like that. And it did have, I think, bi-directional sync. You could point it at a directory in Windows and have it suck PDFs in. So that wraps up this week's section. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Rat hole in on Slack.
Speaking of the past, what did you put this 2012 piece in here about open source is a weapon for?
Oh my goodness.
Ray? I
did not recognize the date.
I know. Well, I think that's the story right there. Because if you read through that piece, it's from Simon Wardley, a guest post on Forbes.com. Yeah, where you can click here in 3 seconds to skip the ad and read the paper or
So
article.
What's the gist of it from 2012?
Basically the gist is that CloudStack is going to take over.
Wow.
Boom.
How'd that go? Did it work out?
Now that you mentioned that, it did seem a little like, well, I guess, you got a dog in this fight. You got to cheer for what you think is going to happen. But I think the ship has sailed. Yeah. Okay. So it was from 2012. But the TLDR was that when you start looking to bring a product into the field, if it's a crowded field, you can use open source as a weapon. You can say, hey, I might not be able to take you on for the most features, but maybe I just undercut all of your value by open sourcing a competitor, and we make it up in services or something like that. Just the strategies of how much to open source, what to open source, because if you don't, somebody else will, and kind of like this whole Evernote thing or Slack thing, open source kind of caught up with them where maybe it's not better, but maybe someday it'll be good enough. I think there's a gap there. I think having seen open source UIs, I think usability will be a differentiator for Slack for a long time.
Isn't there some is this Coté? Have you written it? Is there some definitive open source is not a strategy? Did you write that, or is there some definitive piece that just finally
somebody wrote that?
I don't know. Somewhere I just feel like we need a permanent show note to that. It's like it's never enough, man. Open source not alone is never.
It's
never an answer to any question.
My snarky commentary on that is like the way you make money with open source is with closed source. That's kind of like how things pan out for the most part.
Yes,
it's just like it's also like the way the way you become like an Olympic athlete is be born with the right kind of body. It's just like unless miracles happen, you sort of like need to explore other avenues other than the thing itself.
I have a body for archery, or their equestrian.
Yeah, my body is really tuned for typing. I'm going to be on your Mavis Beacon box of Wheaties.
but yeah, that's definitely been around. That open source is not a business model. Was it Simon Wardley or was it?
Man, we need to find that. We need to credit somebody with actually writing that down and be like, all right, does everyone go read this? Just go.
Yeah, I mean, open source is it's great for all sorts of things. For means of production, like it can result in code that like is very useful to people. But like as far as being a panacea for profit, I think it's sort of built into the system that it's not necessarily purely on its own intended for that, right? Like unless there's other things around it that you're selling. Like you can't sell free.
It's It's friend of the show, Martin Mikos.
Right.
So
just get Sun to buy your company, and then you're done. Although
or
that's gonna be hard now. That's
or
gonna be
now
hard
get
to do
HP to buy your company.
now. Yeah, that's right. Round 2, he did it
Route
again.
2. See,
Yeah, now
open
that's the
source
book he
is
needs to
not a
write.
business model. Acquisition of open source companies
That's
is a
right.
business
Tricking
model.
large companies into buying your company.
So do
Now
you
that is an acquisition. That's a good business model.
do you guys know when HP is supposed to split up? Do you have the date
idea.
emblazoned on your minds? No.
I
No.
don't.
HP.
I know they're laying off a lot of people. Or so they
Yeah,
said.
I think
So,
There's like
That's-
30,000 additional people,
That's a
mostly from the
lot.
services group. Yeah. It is like kind of crappy. Like I was bookmarking. It was kind of crappy. That sort of sucks. But I was bookmarking that the other day, and I was writing one of my commentaries in my bookmarks. One of my rare. I don't know why I don't just post to blogs sort of things. But it's like how do you get to the point where you're firing 30,000 people, and not so much like you get to the point where your business is going bad, but like. I've been in companies. I'm sure we all have where you are hiring people. Like hiring people is not easy.
nah.
Like it takes a lot of paperwork and time, and somehow like a lot of justification. And like you're just like 30,000 people over what you need to do. Like that's. I mean, I'm not. Obviously, it happens. It happens all the time. But it is sort of like that's really weird that happens. Like you're running. Does that mean you're running like really fat? Or that you're gonna like drastically just cut the quality of service that you're provided. Like it's hard to understand how you can
Well, I
get to
think
the
it's
point where
when
you
you
fire that
exit.
many people.
I think it's kind of comes down when you're exiting major business or segments, right? Like you've sort of been halfway in or halfway out for a long period of time, and then suddenly you decide, well, okay, we're getting out of something. We're going, and I think that's what Drew.
We're getting out of business.
It probably the question had been asked many times, but no one was really willing to deal with it. But then someone's like, okay, I'm going to deal with this, and and when they're going to do it, you're like, we're going to take a lot because we don't want to do this again, right? That's the
I guess there could be another scenario where, and this is all conspiratorial stuff, where we're like, you should be getting rid of 10,000 people. But if you were to get rid of them, that would like freak out investors in Wall Street. So you have to wait for like a window of crap to like, let all the blood out, as it were. And so it's sort of like, well, whatever, more terrible stuff. Like we've already bottomed out as far as expectations and perception. So we can just kind of like dump everything out at the same time.
Well, I also
instead of
think,
just doing it ongoing.
My read on the whole HB thing is, forgetting the actual names of the company. It's just essentially growth business, legacy business. And the legacy business is like, okay, we're going to run this as a legacy business, and we've reset, Wall Street's expectations, and therefore we're going to reset our cost structure, right? Which is, so it's an opportunity to do that, whereas you don't do that very often in companies.
Yep. More big companies not faring well. This I need to finally go read Stephen O'Grady's The Software Paradox. I think he explains why this is happening. Have either of you read that?
It's on my Kindle.
What does it say? What is his?
Well, it's another O'Grady booklet, which is to say it's an appropriate size to read, not a ponderous tome like lots of books that I never get around to reading. And I think you can get it free I think New Relic maybe sponsored it.
Somebody got it to me for free. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's basically seeks to explain like why all these big software companies are doing poorly. And I think I think the software paradox is a little bit of what we were talking about earlier. I say all of this having admitted I need to read the book, so I have no idea what
That's
it
even
is.
better, Coté. Tell us what you think he wrote. That
It's
would
the
be
perfect size for not reading.
I love it. I love it.
I think it's essentially like software is eating the world. So software is ubiquitous and very useful, and yet all these software companies are like losing money right and left.
Wait, let's just keep making stuff up, having not read it. I think what it's really
these
about is
podcasts
applying sabermetrics to the economy.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I think it's just about the Boston Red Sox. I don't think it has anything.
Probably.
To do with,
You know what? I think the Monktoberfest is next week too, which
right, so he'll be
I
talking
believe I'm
about
going to. Yeah, we'll find out.
All right, while he's there, ask him about what his book's about.
Or maybe even read it on the way there.
No, we're not reading it. No way we're reading it.
Yeah. So do you know about X509 certificates, Brandon? Do you know about all this stuff?
I mean, I saw about your little note there about Netflix open sourcing a new project. What was the
Uh-huh.
name? It was called
It's like the
Lemur?
chaos lemur or something. No, or maybe just introducing lemur, not the chaos lemur, just lemur.
This is always this is sort of the I think this is always kind of the good example of open source, and Netflix does a lot of it. It's like, listen, we're having this problem. It's a total pain in the ass. We think we solved it this way. Try it if you want it, right? So I think in the net of this is just like, hey man, cloud certificates are a total pain in the ass. It's funny because in the article they talk about how developers have problems with them. As far as I can tell, every human being on planet Earth has a problem with certificates. It is like the most esoteric, complicated, confusing thing of all time. So it's to their credit, right? It looks like they've attempted to open source a framework of management of all these fun certificates a lot easier. And I do think in the spirit of open source, they put it out there, trying to get people to use it, make it better. It certainly has AWS in mind when they built it, but it's not exclusively um, need to be used with that. So I think if you have lots of certificates, or if you're a company that is doing lots of cloud computing, you probably do. It's another way to manage it. So I thought it looked pretty cool. I can't tell you I have any hands-on experience, so that's just me looking at it like they seem to have thought a lot about the problem, which is always nice.
Now, why are certificates so difficult? Is it just because like
There's lots of options to when you create certificates. So that itself is complicated. And then, of course, certificates end up expiring. So when you have lots of them, and of course, when you're in the world of, Matt Ray's DevOps world, and you have lots of things and you're trying to manage it and you're trying to do it automated, right? It creates a big management headache. And of course, right, as we all know, developers are lazy, just like the human race, and they don't want to have to remember all this and have it come up and bite them in the ass at the wrong time. So I think, when I look at it, it's just a management framework to do all of this and take some of the pain out of it. I don't know, Matt Ray, have you guys at Chef, do you guys have some magic for managing certificates? Or do you have solutions you integrate with that do it?
I mean, we integrate with a bunch of different products that do managing secrets, if you will, not just certificates, but
Right, all kinds of
managing
secrets,
secrets. And yeah, it's a pain. And as part of Matt Ray's world of DevOps,
Matt Ray's DevOps world?
laziness is definitely a key. So people try to find something that quickly solves their problem, but being a security product, nobody trusts anything. Especially, strangely, people don't trust open source, where they can do peer review. So it's not great. I mean, the state of managing secrets out there, but the startups come and go.
So would you say in the security space? So it seems like in the systems management space, starting back with the CF engine, the Puppet, the Ops Code Chef, like all these guys, there was like this new generation of almost painfully naive young developers who were like, the current way we do this sucks, right? And we are going to write a new way of doing automation and therefore systems management and like kind of make it easier and not be wrapped up in the old ways of doing it. So that's been beneficial, not least of which so that you can like have an exploding AeroPress on your desk, in a nice room. But has a similar thing like that happened in security? Because it seems like that's what needs to happen in security, where it's sort of like someone like me like looks at all this security stuff and it's like, I have no idea what's going on here. And the security people are like, that's great, loser, leave, right? Like it's not very welcoming. Whereas like nowadays it's sort of like, if systems management seems confusing, there's like a more natural, like almost humanistic tone to it in language that we use. And you were just using one of them, like, we need a place to keep our secrets. Like in the past, they'd be like, well, we got to have our certificates in our RFC ISO 9500 X509 DLUOP somewhere. It's like, you mean the things you don't want people to talk about, like secrets? And so like, are there movements in the security world to kind of like make it more humane or not?
My answer would be where, much like systems management, like before the new, the new world, Matt's raised DevOps world. Before that, there was a lot of pain and chaos. I think in security, we're still kind of in a lot of pain and chaos, like where there are certainly many people, I mean, this being the latest example, right, trying to incrementally solve the problems. I mean, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but I would agree. I would argue that, DevOps, right, in that whole book, right, I always point to that book. It's like, hey, this was a disruptive way to rethink everything, right? They really went out and said, let's rethink it all. And, we're intentionally disruptive because hey, if you don't change it all, and of course all the culture and all the stuff that we kind of make fun of now, then you don't solve the real problem. So security, I think, is just in the midst of that, right? Most of the startups that I've seen are incrementally making one part a little bit better, but someone stepping back and just saying, hey, this is all wrong. I think we are ripe for that. I think it's maybe only now just emerging, but it's very ugly. It's not clear what's going to emerge.
Yeah.
But is there something you can holistically do to just say, I'm going to fix security for you? I mean, it seems like it's such a bunch of little different problems that they all together make up your security posture, but
Yeah.
can you
Well, I
solve
think you got
everything?
to go back to, let's go back to the developer, right? Just like kind of like we can kind of say the same thing with operations, right? It's like, well, for a long time, developers essentially just ignored it, right? And then it got to a problem that it's like the developers got involved. Like, hey, we need to take this seriously because it's eaten into our real time. Like, we can't code. We're always fighting fires, and this has really become a pain. So I think security is, going the same route. Whereas, like, think about it, like almost everything in programming is by default, it's not secure, right? Like, you have to do things to make it secure. Like, by default, the database isn't secure. By default, the database has credentials. By default, all our laptops are unencrypted. So, I think until someone comes back and says, listen, everything, by default, everything, security is on all the time, right? Everything is done, and people start to build frameworks and programming and think about that, and it's not always after the fact, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had a discussion with a developer or a development team where it's like, hey, were the passwords encrypted? And it's like, no, we'll get to that later, right? Like, it's like that can never happen, right? That has to always be the default password. And we're sort of making it picking on developers here, but really it's just about adopting a new attitude, right? It's like, no, we're going to build the tools one time, get them all right, so that all these things don't have all these security holes. Much like when, now automation is just part of the development process. It's not like something that's seen as like an after the fact thing that you just do. It's like, oh, this is how we do it, right? And so
Yeah.
until that mindset comes up, and I think, so why does that happen? It's like, well, enough security breaches and enough money lost will eventually make its way back to the development community. You're like, hey, we just can't do this anymore. But I think it's, it's still a ways out, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I set that up because there are definitely people talking about that and trying to enact it, and they're still looking for a better name than secure DevOps or sec DevOps,
Rugged ops.
or rugged ops. But the point is, security is not something you do after the fact. Just like develop DevOps is, you can't just throw some ops on the problem after the fact. Now you got to start bringing security into the conversation.
I want to suggest an Uber movement called Everything at Once Ops. Like,
Star ops.
that's there you go, Star Ops.
Well, or just like pass it all, right? Just like, the platform handles it.
Yeah.
Cloud Foundry secure by default, man. What's the
Yeah,
problem?
someone should work on making money off of that concept. That's not a good idea.
You take something
But
open source and you make it better.
But to your point, I do think you hit on the whole thing. It's like anytime, it's like, is there some rule, like when you're pitching a movie, if you're pitching a movie, you never pitch a movie. It's like A and B, right? It's something, and I think that's the whole problem with security, right? It's like, no, it isn't. It isn't something you're trying to latch on to DevOps, right? DevOps was its own thing. It's its own movement, right? It's like security needs to have its own thing, right? Thought about it in its own way that would really resonate in a different way versus just trying to like, add on like another phrase to DevOps, right? It's just like, that doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't. And I think that's where there isn't a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of people talking. I don't know if there's a lot of people that have got are really, kind of like the DevOps movement. I don't think people have really figured out like this is the way we should do it. Right.
Well, my suggestion, being a security idiot, right, is like I feel like, again, like if we use changing systems management, like modernizing systems management in the 2000s as an example, I feel like the first step is like explain the 5 things that you do in security and kind of how, not necessarily how they work, but like what they are in normal terms. So you've got like encryption. I think everyone kind of understands encryption, but you could still kind of explain like, here's what it looks like to use it. And then there's basically like, I guess, certificates, which are establishing, trusted is the wrong word, but that whoever is presenting the certificate is who they say they are.
Right.
And why do I care about that?
Yep.
Right.
Proofing who they are. Yep.
Right. Then the third concept is sort of like, the first concept has to be passwords. That's like such a big deal, right? And we could use a fancy term and call that authentication.
Authentication, yes.
But it's basically like passwords. A part of that is 2-factor authentication, and it's kind of like these are things so that like people know who you are and they present. And it can't be all like cheesy ass infographics that don't say anything. It has to be kind of technical enough. It has to be at the level of like explaining how a 3-dimensional lock works. There's little tumblers in there, and the key goes in there, and because the key matches the tumblers, like it means the cylinder can turn and then the bolt can come back. Like something that's like that. I'm not explaining the physics of it and how lubricated everything needs to be and like all of that, how many pins there are, but like something at that level. And see, the dog's getting excited about this. She wants to know how to open the door for herself because she wants to go out constantly. So, like, I don't know. Those are 3, and then there's permissions. Like, I don't know where those fit in, but it's sort of like I don't even think like that level of just knowing what security is something that like the security community, either the security community wants to do. Like, they don't want to educate me. They're like,
but see, that's the problem.
Or people like ourselves, like. You need to have like a Luke Kaniz and a Jesse and an Adam Jacobs and Andrew Schaefer and other people who come around and be like, yeah, I know what all that language is, and I'm never going to use it again, except when I'm talking to the hardcore nerds. And I'm going to come up with a totally new language and way of talking about things that explains something as boring as installing software on computers, right? And you need to have that for security.
Yeah, but I don't think. I think the problem is it's still trying to let security be a standalone thing. I mean, just like Idle
this
was
is a good point.
If like Idle was saying, if we just had stronger silos, if we had better contracts between the silos, you people would get security right because we would tell you. And like, no, you're going to have to leave your ivory tower and come embed your security people in this sec DevOps team so we get it straight. So when we're coding and you're like, hey, did you check the permissions on that? We're like, good idea. Instead of after the fact, like, thou shalt set permissions to this.
Oh, yeah. You had that. What was that?
Go back in time.
That's a good example of the impenetrability of security. Of like, why am I typing in octets for something?
Exactly. So you need to have like your graybeard sitting on staff to be like, yes, octets. You can use R's and W's instead.
See, there you go.
But I think it's an interesting question. Like, what starts? Like, I mean, go back to the guys you just mentioned, right? It's like, in the end, right? Like, why did they take that on? Like, why did they get on almost like a cult-like mission to take this out, right? Because, I mean, it really was, obviously lots of companies started out of the movement, but I think, it was organic, I guess, both organic and authentic movement. Like, hey, we just want to make this better. It doesn't happen all that often, right? We have like really smart guys that are just feel like we got to push the industry forward on this. And so, I don't know, like there's lots of people in security and lots of like really smart people, but I don't know if anyone's trying to even do that, right?
And both of you have raised this point multiple times, like using, again, the historic analog. I think the reason all that automation stuff came about is because the individuals doing it were also developers, sort of, and they were suffering from it. So they wanted to fix a problem that they had. And as both of you have been emphasizing, like, maybe until you get the application developers to have to be responsible and worry about security, like the problem won't really solve itself. Like, and this goes back all the way to the Netflix thing. Like, I guess they had developers who had to worry about security, and the developers were like, well, this is fucking madness. Let me bust out and write some code here. And like that's the similar thing you've seen in systems management over the past 10 years is like developers have had to do systems management more and more, and they're like, oh my God, what kind of permanent fever dream state has this industry been in?
Exactly. And so, maybe standalone security isn't such a good idea as, making those teams that, when you see sites like Google and Facebook, they don't have, ops people. They have site reliability engineers, SREs, and their job is not, I do the security only. It's like I care about everything, and I have to care about everything.
Yes. Well, speaking of caring about everything, Microsoft has a Linux distro now. Is that right? Support their networking thing. I was looking over that, and I remember reading that. It was last week, and it's indicative of this interesting thing. Like we also have in the show notes. We'll put it in the bonus link that like Oracle's losing revenue in licensed software, and the Netflix people, as we were talking about, had to come up with their own software for doing security, and then Microsoft is at such pains either to not pay for what they need, or because it doesn't exist, that they have to go and like write their own networking switch stuff, like based on Linux, which is a larger trend of like there's all these people are having to build their own code for things rather than rely on the traditional.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly a commercial product.
Yes, I was overstating it.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has a substantial data center presence, and they're members of Open Compute, and so they're running a lot of bare metal machines, and finding a good network operating system that you don't have to pay a premium for is, there are choices out there. There's Cumulus, which is based on Debian. Facebook has open sourced a lot of stuff too. So it just kind of makes sense that you would have a custom tailored Linux operating system for switches. This one happens to come from Microsoft, who called said operating system a cancer at one point. So things change over time.
Yeah. I had a point I was going to make, but I totally forgot it. But I will tell you, following up on last week's episode, before we get into recommendations, unless there's anything else the rest of you wanted to go over, I have remedied my situation, and I have maybe like 3 pounds of beef in the crock pot downstairs, ready to eat. It's great. Put it on for hours. That's what I've learned, is that you have to cook beef a long time, and I read the science behind this. There's some sort of stuff in there. I think there's a few X509 certificates, and you keep it in there long enough, and once it reaches not a temperature but stays the same temperature for a while, those certificates break down, and you can finally sink your teeth into it, and it gets all pulled aparty. So you got to cook the beef like 8 hours, not like pork. You can cook pork like 4 hours.
Is this your pick or what? What are you talking about, meat?
I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. We're recording later in the day than
you're totally distracted at the thought of 3 pounds of beef sitting in a container downstairs. You're like, well, we could talk about the show, but there's meat.
There's also beef to discuss. Well, before we go into recommendations, you guys have anything else you want to go over?
I don't have anything about meat.
Well, that's unfortunate, but understandable. Well, I'm going to be at several DevOps days throughout the rest of the year. I'll be at the Charlotte one, where I don't think they've announced it yet, but I'm going to be speaking there, doing one of the opening talks. And I'll be at the Silicon Valley one, which is in Mountain View, and probably the Detroit one, unless something changes. And if anyone's out there, it'd be nice to meet up with y'all, talk with you. And we'll be there with our full-on, pivotal sponsor stuff, so you can come get a bunch of free junk. And I'm also this will be fun to talk about as we get nearer. I'll have to get some tips from maybe Brandon, maybe Matt Ray. I'm going to go to my first Gartner conference that I've ever gone to, the architecture and something conference in December. If it weren't for this conference, this would be the first year in a long time that I hadn't gone to Las Vegas. But I'm going to be going to Las Vegas just for Gartner.
You must really love those guys.
Well, I just want to see what the big deal is. Like, I hope there's a lot of carpets and good swag. Maybe pick up some chargers, things like that. And also, it's not a recommendation, but I started a somewhat new podcast under an old podcast, the old Lords of Computing, if you remember that. I never really got that on the back of my car's window, but hopefully we'll have it on the podcast. But I started it with this guy, Matt Curry from Allstate. And I'll admit, I'm totally ripping off Ducey's podcast and the other guy, the Goat Can, where there's someone from a vendor and someone from industry, and they go interview people about doing stuff. And that's pretty much what we're up to. If you go to Coté.io, you can find a link to it, and I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, we're looking for people just to talk to about, doing all this transformation gunk. It should be fun. See what kind of WD-40 they're spraying on those locks, so to speak. Well, with that, why don't we start with Brandon's recommendation?
Well, thank you, Coté. As everyone knows, iOS 9, I think it's out today. So I actually upgraded it, and it's pretty nice. But I figured this just shows you where I'm at on my knowledge of these various iOS releases. I'm going to recommend a new feature from iOS 8 that I just discovered. So as you know, on the lock screen, it just shows basically your passcode. But I read a quick article from some people that work in emergency rooms. They said there's this feature that you can actually have on there. It's called lock, and it can say show medical information. So if in the unlikely event that you are taken to a hospital, they know about it. That on the lock screen, you can set it up to basically tell somebody who your emergency contact is, and really anything that you would want someone to know in a crisis if they look at your phone. So
serve him only beef.
That's right, serve him only beef. And so
it's like a diabetic for beef.
That's right. The net is you can go into the health app, which I have to say sadly I never opened it until I saw this article. You go to the health app, you can set up all this information, and then you can basically turn it on. So there's a link that we'll put in the show notes that explains it all. But that was a nifty little feature. It's one of those things your average person won't know about that or ever care about it, but emergency room techs and doctors and stuff, they do know about it, and maybe you need it. So try it out.
How about yourself, Matt Ray?
Sadly, I don't have that iPhone thing. I just have the ability to put whatever text I want on my lock screen. So I could put needs be. But this week's pick, I don't really have a strong pick, but I did just switch over to using Runkeeper for tracking my running. I'd been using Google had one that was open source that was for some reason really inaccurate recently, and so I started looking around at other apps, and I'm not using the professional features for Runkeeper, but it gives me what I want, which is a map, some splits, some times, elevation change, heart rate. I'm cheap. I don't pay for any of the extra features.
You probably block ads too.
Oh man,
you're one of those.
That might have to be a next show where I rant for an hour about trying to make me feel bad about using an ad blocker.
Click here in 5 seconds to find out why.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Runkeeper. It's pretty nice if you're comparing all the different running apps, because there's a lot out there, and I read a lot of reviews.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. I'll have to check that one out. Now, did they have one yet where you can take a picture of your food and they Mechanical Turk entering it in? Because I could get behind that.
No. If only one day, Coté. That's your future business idea. One day.
Well, I'm going to edit that part out because that's the $1 million idea.
Yes, it is.
And you could tie it to Yelp, where it would just look up the restaurant you're in and compare it to their menu.
Here's what I'm going to do. It'll only work in Evernote.
That's not going to save your unicorn, Coté.
Well, my recommendation this week is, I think they call it the Jot Micro. It's from Adonet or something. It's like an iOS stylus. I assume it works with Android, but what do I care? And I had been looking at them online, and I stopped myself from buying them because I was like, you don't need to buy more gadgets. You can't draw. But Then I was in the DFW airport, looking to entertain myself by buying things. Bad habit. And I saw that they had it in one of those funky little electronic stores. Granted, it was like $4 or $5 cheap, more expensive than Amazon, but whatever. And of course, they had it locked down. Like, what's up with that? But I got the micro one, and it's like this little metal thing, and it looks kind of weird. It's got a point, and then it has this clear plastic disc at the end. I'm not really sure why that's there for stability. And it works really well, actually. Like, I haven't tested the palm rejection stuff, but like it's a lot better than those like big bulbous free styluses you'll get at conferences. And I think it's like $30 or something. And if you get that paper app, which I think is now free, it's great. You can draw things. And I used it this weekend. We went to, as you can see in the background, I got a bookshelf. So we went to IKEA. So I had to do a bunch of like measuring rooms, and I just busted that out and like sketched some things out and drew. It was fun. So I think it's if you were in that situation that I was in, where you're like, I am not going to spend money to entertain myself, you should totally do it. It's fun.
It's totally worth it.
IKEA's got a CAD app on their website for designing rooms. You just put in the measurements, and you can drag and drop things from their catalog all over the room.
Huh. Maybe one day Siri can help us do that. Siri, order me some furniture.
Siri, feng shui this place.
Yeah, it is, as I was joking about over the weekend. It's like now that I've stayed at a lot of Airbnbs, like IKEA is almost like going on vacation. Most Airbnb apartments are just
man,
IKEA.
Yes,
you can spot all the stuff instantly.
Feels like home.
Yeah, especially the spatulas. Their kitchen stuff is just really not up to snuff. It's not really up to my stringent standards. Well, as always, thanks for listening. This has been Software Defined Talk, which you can find at the vanity URL, softwaredefinedtalk.com. This is episode 44, if I remember. So you can also see the full show notes at cote.io/SDT44. And why don't you tell them about the exciting chef events they can go to, Matt Ray?
Well, we've got the Chef Community Summit coming up next month in Seattle. I believe the hotel block is just about gone, but if you go to chef.io/summit, you can find links to the Community Summit, which is 2-day unconference. A lot of great folks will be there, a lot of good conversations. I think it's October 13th through the 15th or something like that. And then we also have one in London on the 3rd and 4th, or the 4th and 5th. Man, dates. But if you use the discount code software, you can save, I think, 15 or 20% off your ticket. So
that's money you can use to buy an unnecessary stylus that you can take notes on while you're there.
A bunch of IKEA spatulas.
And as always, if you want to check out the Pivotal Cloud Foundry instance we have running, you can go to cote.io/pivotal. You can get 2 free months there, get a free book, all sorts of exciting stuff like that. Have fun with as your buddy Ducey was jesting with me with Cloud Native, and see what the story is. So with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye.